the echoing canyons. I reached the canyon trailhead in the late afternoon, later than I had planned for the hike. The desert sun hung low over the distant ridges of the Chizos Mountains, turning the stone cliffs orange and red. Big Bend always feels bigger than the map suggests, especially once the crowds disappear. I had chosen a narrow canyon route I'd never explored before. It looked simple enough on the trail map, just a winding passage cutting deep through the rock. The first mile of the trail was open desert, scattered with low brush and jagged limestone. The wind carried the dry smell of dust and sun-baked stone across the valley. Eventually, the canyon entrance appeared ahead like a crack in the earth. As soon as I stepped between the towering rock walls, the temperature dropped noticeably. The open sky narrowed to a thin strip overhead. My footsteps began echoing softly against the stone. At first, the echoes sounded normal. Anyone who hikes in narrow canyons knows how easily sound bounces between the walls. Each step produced 2 or 3 faint repeats that faded slowly into the distance. I kept walking deeper, enjoying the quiet isolation. The canyon curved ahead, blocking any view of what waited around the bend. After a while, I noticed something strange about the echoes. One of them arrived slightly later than the others. I paused and listened carefully. The canyon fell completely silent for a few seconds. When I stepped forward again, the sound of my boots scraped across loose gravel. The echo returned as expected, bouncing down the corridor of stone. Then a second echo followed behind it. That one sounded different, heavier somehow. I turned around instinctively, expecting to see another hiker approaching through the narrow passage behind me. The canyon behind me was completely empty. The twisting path stretched back toward the desert entrance with no movement anywhere along it. My own footprints marked the dusty trail in a single line. I waited for another moment, listening to the quiet air inside the canyon walls. Nothing moved. Eventually, I shrugged it off as a trick of acoustics. The deeper I walked, the narrower the canyon seemed to become. The sunlight above faded as the cliffs grew taller and leaned closer together. Shadows gathered along the ground, turning the canyon floor a dull gray color. I could hear every sound I made now. My breathing, my pack shifting, the crunch of stone under my boots. The echoes carried much farther than before. A single step would travel down the canyon and bounce back several times before fading away. Then it happened again. I took a step and heard the echo return twice. The first repeat sounded normal, but the second arrived a moment later than it should have. It was subtle, just enough to make the rhythm feel wrong. I slowed my pace and listened carefully to each movement. The canyon repeated every sound faithfully. Yet occasionally that delayed step appeared again, like someone walking slightly behind me. I stopped walking completely. The canyon went quiet, swallowing every trace of movement. For several seconds, nothing happened. Then a small pebble clicked against the ground somewhere ahead. The noise echoed sharply through the narrow walls. I stared toward the bend in the canyon where the trail disappeared from view. A breeze moved faintly across the upper cliffs. Down where I stood, the air remained still. The canyon twisted again as I continued forward, the stone walls closing tighter around the trail. In some places, the passage was barely wider than a small hallway. My footsteps echoed loudly now, bouncing in sharp bursts from one wall to the other. The sound traveled farther than seemed possible. It almost felt like the canyon itself was repeating the noise deliberately, passing it deeper into the rock. I rounded another bend and called out casually just to test the acoustics. "Hello?" My voice shot down the canyon like a thrown stone, striking the walls and breaking into several returning echoes. The word came back to me again and again until it faded into silence. Then one final voice repeated it. The tone sounded slightly deeper than mine, and it arrived several seconds after the others. I frowned and called again, louder this time. "Anyone down there?" The canyon swallowed the question and threw pieces of it back toward me. "Anyone. Down there. Down there." The echoes stretched the phrase strangely, distorting the rhythm of the words. I listened as they faded one by one, and a final voice answered softly from deeper in the canyon. "Anyone?" A chill ran through my chest as the sound lingered between the walls. It hadn't come from behind me. It had come from somewhere farther down the canyon. I stepped forward slowly, scanning the dark bend ahead. The beam of my flashlight cut across the rock walls and empty ground. There was no one there. but I could feel the weight of the canyon pressing in around me. I walked again, carefully placing each step on the uneven stone path. The canyon turned once more, revealing another stretch of narrow passage. The air smelled colder here, almost damp despite the desert outside. My footsteps echoed loudly in the confined space. Then another sound followed them. Second set of steps, repeating the same rhythm. It's always just a fraction of a second behind mine. I froze instantly. The second set of steps stopped too. Silence filled the canyon like a heavy blanket. My heart pounded so loudly I was certain the sound would echo as well. Slowly, I turned around and shined my flashlight down the trail behind me. The narrow corridor stretched away into darkness. No movement, no figure, just silent stone walls. Then I heard my own voice again. The word I had spoken earlier drifted faintly through the canyon air. Hello. It didn't come from behind me this time. It came from somewhere deeper ahead in the twisting corridor of rock. The tone was almost perfect, but not quite human. It sounded like something repeating the word carefully, learning how it should be spoken. I stood perfectly still, trying to convince myself the sound had been another strange echo. Canyons distort voices the same way they distort footsteps. That was the logical explanation. Still, the word had come from too far ahead. Echoes fade quickly once the sound source stops. This one hadn't faded. It had repeated itself slowly, like someone speaking after hearing me. The canyon ahead remained silent again, as if it were waiting. I took a cautious step forward. The scrape of my boot echoed sharply against the walls. One echo returned immediately, then another. A third arrived a moment later. Then a fourth sound followed them, softer but unmistakable. Another step repeating mine. I stopped instantly. The second rhythm stopped too. The canyon's silence closed in again. Whatever had made that sound was matching my movements perfectly. I told myself it had to be another hiker farther down the canyon. Maybe someone exploring the same route from the opposite direction. The twisting bends could hide a person easily. That explanation felt reasonable enough to calm my nerves. I raised my voice again. Hey, anyone down there? The canyon repeated the question several times. Then the final voice answered quietly. Anyone down there? The reply came from deeper within the canyon, beyond the bend ahead. It was my voice exactly, but the pacing was wrong. Each word stretched slightly longer than when I had spoken it. I stared toward the dark passage where the sound had come from. The beam of my flashlight revealed nothing but rough stone walls and dusty ground. No footprints appeared ahead of me. The trail curved sharply again, disappearing around another wall of rock. I hesitated before stepping forward. Something about the canyon felt different now, as if the air itself had changed. Every sound carried farther than before. My breathing echoed faintly around me. When I walked again, the footsteps returned, mine first. Then the second set, trailing behind. Always just a moment later. I rounded the next bend and stopped abruptly. The canyon ahead narrowed into a tight corridor barely wider than my shoulders. The stone walls rose straight up into darkness above. The ground here was smoother, worn down by years of shifting sand and rare floods. I studied the dust carefully. My footprints ended exactly where I stood. Nothing had walked ahead of me. Then something moved behind me. The sound came clearly through the canyon, a single step striking the ground. I spun around quickly, shining my flashlight back down the trail. The beam cut through the darkness, but revealed nothing moving between the walls. The echoes of that step lingered for several seconds before fading. Slowly, another step followed it. This time I didn't move. I simply listened. The second step landed softly somewhere behind the bend I had just passed. It sounded careful, almost cautious, like someone testing the ground before shifting their weight forward. The canyon repeated the noise several times, then silence returned again. Whatever had made the sound was moving closer. My heart began pounding as the realization settled in. The footsteps had been behind me the entire time. They weren't echoes coming from ahead. Something had been following me through the canyon since the moment I entered it. Every time I stopped walking, it had stopped too, matching my movements perfectly. I backed away slowly toward the narrow passage ahead. The canyon walls pressed close around my shoulders as I moved. My flashlight shook slightly in my hand. The beam slid across the rock behind me, searching for any movement. The trail remained empty. Then my voice spoke again from the darkness. Hello? The word sounded almost perfect this time. The voice didn't come from ahead anymore. It came from directly behind me, close enough that the sound barely echoed. My breath caught in my throat. I forced myself to turn around slowly. The flashlight beam swept across the canyon wall and the dusty trail. For a split second, the light passed over something darker than the surrounding stone. It moved instantly out of the beam. I heard the scrape of stone as something shifted against the canyon wall. The sound echoed sharply in the confined space. My flashlight searched the rock again, but nothing remained where the shape had been. Then my voice repeated once more. "Anyone down there?" The tone was nearly identical to mine now. The realization hit me all at once. It had been learning. Every word I spoke, every sound I made, the canyon carried it down the passage. And something hidden within the rock had been repeating them, practicing them, copying them carefully until the voice sounded human. The footsteps began again behind me, slow, deliberate. I turned and walked quickly toward the canyon entrance. The narrow walls amplified every step as I moved. Behind me, the second rhythm followed immediately. My voice echoed again from the darkness. This time it shouted exactly what I had said earlier. "Hey, anyone down there?" The canyon repeated the phrase again and again as I hurried through the twisting corridor. I didn't stop moving until the canyon walls opened back into the desert. The last light of evening stretched across the valley floor. Behind me, the narrow passage looked completely silent again. For several seconds, I stood there, listening. Then, from somewhere deep inside the canyon, my voice drifted out one last time. "Hello," only this time it sounded perfect.